Welcome to Anwar. Today we're talking about the seismic shift happening within the unity government. I mean, specifically, the intense pressure that's now facing Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim.
Right, and it's all coming off the back of the Democratic Action Party's disastrous performance in the recent 17th Sabah state election.
Disastrous is really the only word for it.
It is. This wasn't just a minor political setback in a distant state. This was, frankly, an electoral catastrophe, and it's sending shockwaves right through the federal coalition.
Right into Putraja.
Exactly. For the Democratic Action Party, this was a total collapse in Sabah, and that collapse is fundamentally shaking the foundation of the government. We have to look closely at what this event really reveals about the confidence, or, well, the profound lack of it, among the urban and, crucially, the Chinese electorate.
And what stands out to me is the immediate internal panic. The Democratic Action Party lost what they considered their most reliable vote base.
A base that was virtually unshakable for decades.
And they had to hold an emergency 5-hour Central Executive Committee meeting. 5 hours.
You don't do that for a minor issue. That's an existential threat discussed.
Absolutely. What was talked about behind those closed doors is so much more critical than the carefully worded public statements that came out after.
Yeah, we have to unpack the political response, not just the election result itself. The scale of the defeat is where we have to start, because the numbers themselves tell the story.
Okay, so let's get into that. The scale of the loss. It's hard to overstate just how significant this is for them.
They were completely wiped out.
Completely. Losing long-held, typically secure Chinese majority seats. Seats they would have considered their political inheritance.
This was their stronghold.
The very definition of it. So this wasn't just a marginal loss, it was a critical, wholesale failure.
And if you zoom out, it's not just a Democratic Action Party problem. The failure extends across the entire Pakatan Harapan coalition.
Right.
Out of 73 seats they contested in Sabah, the entire coalition managed to secure just one. And even that single victory, it needs a massive asterisk next to it.
It tells you everything about their actual health on the ground.
It does. That one win only happened because they brought in an assemblyman, Jamawi Jafar, who had defected to Parti Keadilan Rakyat just days before the election.
So effectively, they didn't win a single seat on their own merit. It was a pre-packaged deal just to avoid the total humiliation of a zero.
Exactly. It just suggests zero public enthusiasm. And that's the crux of it, really. The failure in Sabah points to a massive confidence crisis.
A crisis coming from a voter base the unity government absolutely cannot afford to lose.
The analysis is crystal clear. Urban voters, and particularly the Chinese electorate, who make up roughly a quarter of Malaysia's total voter pool, they just abandoned the coalition led by Dato Seri Anwar Ibrahim.
And when you look at the pattern of the seats they lost, it just doesn't feel like it was only about local issues. It feels deeper.
It suggests that the very voters who traditionally anchor the Democratic Action Party, the middle class, urban, reformist segment, they've become deeply disillusioned.
And when that foundation starts to crumble, the whole structure above it starts to shake.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. The party leadership is feeling immense pressure from their grassroots, realizing that being in the unity government is actively costing them support, not delivering the reforms they promise.
So it begs the question, and I'd ask anyone listening to this, what do you think prompted this kind of voter behavior? Was it all down to local Sabah politics, or was this a much deeper, more alarming reflection of national sentiment?
The evidence, I think, leans heavily toward national sentiment. State elections often act as a sort of temperature check for the federal government.
A midterm report card.
A very harsh one in this case. The expectation from that urban base was for immediate, impactful change. Things like separating the attorney general's powers from the public prosecutor, or, real high-profile anti-corruption action.
And when those big-ticket items seem to stall or get slow-walked, the voters who put you in power based on those promises, they feel betrayed.
And that disappointment translates directly into electoral punishment. We saw it in Sabah. But this is where the story shifts, from the loss itself to the reaction to the loss.
Yes, back to that 5-hour meeting. The Central Executive Committee. We're hearing from internal party sources, people who were in that room, that they seriously considered a truly drastic measure, exiting the unity government altogether.
Wow. Considered exiting, that is a political bombshell. You don't just throw that threat out lightly when you know you're the key to the whole coalition's stability.
It shows the level of panic. They realized staying in government seemed to be destroying their credibility with their own base.
But they didn't pull the trigger. not immediately.
No, which shows some careful calculation. Instead, they set a condition, a deadline. The internal position was that if the reform agenda isn't significantly accelerated by the first half of 2026, withdrawal would be back on the table.
So that sets a 6-month political tripwire under the entire government.
That clock is ticking loudly.
And after that marathon meeting, you had the Democratic Action Party Secretary General, Anthony Loke, make a very calculated public statement.
I remember he said the party would work with the prime minister over the next 6 months to push the reform agenda forward rapidly.
Right. And you have to read between the lines there. That public statement is just the polite veneer for a private ultimatum.
It's a public confirmation of the intense internal pressure. It's not a request for cooperation. It's a mandate from their own party saying, secure these reforms or we walk.
For their own political survival.
Exactly. And when we talk about them considering leaving, we have to remember the sheer political weight they carry. This isn't some small party.
No, they're the biggest. With 40 members of parliament, they are the single largest component party in the entire unity government. They are the backbone.
If you just look at the parliamentary math, their withdrawal would instantly destabilize and likely collapse the administration.
They provide the numbers, and they provide the political legitimacy from that urban bloc. That's their leverage. And they are finally, it seems, wielding it.
Which is why that 2026 deadline is so potent. It holds the government hostage to the promises that got them elected.
And the long-term threat is even more severe than an immediate collapse. If this trend of voter abandonment, which we saw so clearly in Sabah, if that extends to Peninsular Malaysia in the next general election,
Which is due in early 2028.
then political analysts are pretty much unanimous. It would be the end of Dato' Anwar Ibrahim's opportunity for a renewed mandate. He simply cannot govern without that critical 25% of the voter base.
It's incredible. For nearly 2 decades, the Democratic Action Party could count on that secure Chinese vote bank as their absolute bedrock. It was a certainty in Malaysian politics.
And now they've gone from being a powerful, critical ally in the Sabah government to, well, a virtually negligible role after this defeat. It just shows you how quickly political capital can erode.
Especially when the promised return on investment, in this case institutional reform, isn't delivered.
And this is the tightrope the ultimatum forces the prime minister to walk. He has to make some incredibly difficult political choices. He's got to balance the need to satisfy his largest coalition partner and their voters.
While also maintaining broader Malay support to ensure his own tenure lasts.
Because any radical reform that the urban electorate is demanding, genuine transparency, economic liberalization, could easily be spun by other partners as undermining traditional structures.
So if he pushes too hard on reforms, he risks instability from one side.
And if he slows down, he guarantees an implosion from the other, driven by the Democratic Action Party's need to win back its base. He is caught.
The pressure cooker is very real. And the demands, I imagine, are focused on things that impact daily life. The cost of living is hitting every Malaysian household hard. They want to see an end to perceived selective prosecution.
They want stability for the ringgit. They want to see foreign investment, and that requires absolute certainty on the rule of law.
So now the prime minister has to choose. Does he deliver a high-impact, maybe politically risky, institutional reform? Like, say, making the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission truly independent.
Or does he focus on more immediate economic relief that might quiet things down but won't satisfy the DAP's core structural demands? The cost of not choosing is the collapse of his government in 2026.
So we circle right back. This isn't just a state-level setback. It is a national crisis of confidence, and it is centered entirely on the pace of reform.
Absolutely. The first half of 2026 is no longer just a date on a calendar. It's a hard deadline for the unity government to prove it can deliver meaningful change. Failure to do that will likely trigger an internal implosion.
Driven by its most powerful partner.
Yes.
So considering all this internal unrest and this urgent timeline, what specific high-impact reform do you think the Democratic Action Party needs to see in the next 6 months to stay? Does it have to be something on the economy that gives immediate relief to households? Or does it have to be a profound institutional change to restore faith in the system itself?
That is the political decision that will define the rest of Dato' Seri Anwar Ibrahim's tenure.
Remember to like and subscribe for more videos like this.